Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you, Dow. Under your leadership, Greater Seattle really is at the vanguard of the metropolitan revolution in this country. And also thanks to Phyllis and all the people here from JP. This is a great partnership and a timely partnership, as you'll see. I just want to start with an admonition from George Bernard Shaw. The sign of an educated person is to be deeply moved by statistics. So with that in mind, let me begin, okay? What is the moment that we face in the aftermath of the Great Recession? And there's a reason why it was called great. We still need to grow 7.4 million jobs in this country to make up the jobs we lost during the downturn, but to keep pace with population growth and labor market dynamics. Even more importantly, we need to grow better jobs. We had 81 million people living in poverty or near poverty in 2000. That has jumped to 107 million people in 2011. Quantum leap in one decade, and as the county executive said, poverty is suburbanizing in the United States. So in theory, what you need to do is to shift from a growth model, pre-recession, which was characterized by consumption and debt, to a growth model which is about an economy being fueled by innovation, not just idea generation, but production. We need to make things again in the United States, powered by advanced energy, and driven by exports and foreign direct investment and global engagement and immigration. If you do those things, if you shift to a productive, innovative, sustainable economy, we will create more and better jobs. So with that context, I want to talk about three things. First of all, it is this imperative for global engagement, particularly at a time when the world is urbanizing and we are creating enormous markets for American goods and American services. Secondly, it is to remind us, this is the Brookings Metro Mantra, metros are the centers of global trade and investment. Metros are the engines of domestic and global economies. That's why the United States is such a powerful economy, because as you'll see, we're the quintessential metropolitan nation. And I'll give you statistics on where Seattle fits. And finally, metros can't rest on their laurels. Metros need to engage, need to innovate continuously, and we'll sort of walk through a playbook that we're seeing redound to the benefit of many cities and metros, both here and abroad. So let me start with this imperative for global engagement. And let me start with really this notion that we have crossed an economic Rubicon in the world. Together, the BRICS, Brazil, India, and China, accounted for about a fifth of global GDP in 2009, surpassing the United States for the first time. You see the statistics in a relatively short period of time, the share of the global economy that they will grow. What's happening? What's happening is they are urbanizing. In 2009, again, we passed this moment in world history where more than 50% of the world's population live in cities. In a relatively short period of time, that will jump to 60%. In the next 2 decades, we are going to witness one of the largest migrations of people in the history of the world. China's urban share of its population will increase by nearly 20% as 300 million more people move to its mega cities. In Africa, nearly 350 million new urbanites will increase their urban share by 9%. And finally, estimate 227 million Indians will move from the countryside into their metropolitan areas. This is the great urban age. This is the metropolitan century. So as the world's cities and metros fill with greater and greater shares of the world's population in the coming decades, there are market opportunities, but there are serious environmental and social challenges created by this city building. Now, BCG projects that the total infrastructure investment required in transportation, electricity, water, other infrastructure to keep pace with population growth in emerging market cities in Asia, Latin America, is $30 trillion over the next 20 years, about 60 to 70% of the total global investment in infrastructure over that period. Estimate $13.8 trillion in housing investment will be needed from 2010 to 2030. Again, a large share of this investment going to cities in Mexico, Brazil, India, China. McKinsey Global Institute projects that the capacity of the world's ports to handle global container traffic to increase by more than 2.5 times by 25. Now, this is not about building cities as frankly they currently are being built in China or in India, or in Brazil and other parts of the world. This is about sustainable growth, because we have seen all across the world what happens when we do not focus on the environment at the same time we talk about growth. So air pollution, energy efficiency, waste disposal, this is not just the same old supply the goods or the services of the past. This is a juncture point in the world, and we need to step up. Now, if we do step up, there are huge benefits. For every $1 billion increase in exports supports up to 5,000 jobs. And research, and this really goes to a central issue facing this metropolis and many cities and metros around this country, there is a wage premium in the export firms because of the quality of the products that they produce and the services that they provide and greater benefits. Now, foreign-owned firms employ about 5% of U.S. workers, and these companies also tend to pay their workers more and contribute dramatically to the productivity growth of our country. So how are we doing on trade and investment given that context? Now, the good news is for all the talk of a post-industrial economy, the U.S. remains a manufacturing powerhouse, which everyone in this room knows. $944 billion in manufactured goods in 2010. That makes us the third largest exporter in the world behind China and, yes, Germany. But this is not just about putting goods in a container. America is the #1 exporter of services in the world, and which gives us about $160 billion trade surplus for the last year that we were able to assemble the statistics. So the bottom line is the potential for America to export our quality goods and services to the rising cities of the world are great, but here's the challenge. Only 13% of our GDP comes from exports, compared to much higher levels in China, in Canada, and the other countries that you see. We have looked internal for our growth, inward for our growth, for decades, for generations. We now need to look outside. Foreign direct investment, let's start again with the good news. We've been the largest recipient of FDI with nearly $4 billion in FDI stock in 2012. But as you'd expect, as China grows, as India grows, our share of the global FDI market is reducing. So can we fully realize the potential of global markets, and particularly the potential of global urbanization, city to city, metro to metro? Now, in our view, our global economic ties are anchored by a set of advanced industries and supported by the building blocks of modern economies: innovation, human capital, and infrastructure. What are advanced industries? You have them. High value, R&D intensive industries that concentrate the nation's science, technology, engineering, math, and computer workers, the so-called STEM economy. Now, this includes advanced manufacturing, obviously, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, aerospace, auto, but it's also high-value services, software, computer systems design, telecom, that are awfully tightly linked with production. You know, the U.S. made a mistake over the last several decades of thinking manufacturing somehow was the old industry, right? As we go forward, the interplay of the physical and the digital, of manufacturing and services is inextricable. And so we have to build from that really critical insight. Now, these advanced industries punch above their weight. They only employ, this is amazing, they only employ 7.5% of our workforce, but they employ nearly 1 1/3 engineers and architects, they generate 2/3 of our patents, and they invest $85 95% of the nation's private sector R&D. And as we all know, it's the corporate R&D that's leading to product innovation. They matter because they're on the leading edge of innovation, but they radiate much further. They drive productivity in other sectors of the economy. They support long supply chains, small and medium-sized enterprises, and they stimulate local economies. There is a multiplier effect when you have advanced industries, whether they're on the manufacturing side like Boeing, or whether they're on the services side like Microsoft and Starbucks and so forth. Now, innovation is the historic fuel and catalyst for economic growth, and it powers the growth of these advanced industries. And here's something that we need to think about. While R&D expenditures grew faster than the UK, Japan, and France between 2001 and 2011, we trail the growth rates of the EU, Germany, South Korea, and particularly China. The United States is what we are today because we made major public investments in basic science, in health, in the military, to some extent in the energy. Well, those investments are now at risk. They are getting cut at the federal level, and they are getting cut at the state level. Human capital, basically skilled workforce. Here's the challenge. We've got to get real smart and real fast. Over the next decades, African Americans and Hispanics will grow from about 25% to nearly 40% of the working age population. But here's the challenge that we all know. The rates of educational attainment among these groups trail those of whites and Asians. And so we need to upgrade the education and skills of the next American workforce. And finally, infrastructure. We all know that in the United States, we have not made the kind of investments in transportation, whether it's freight, whether it's passenger, whether it's transit, that we need to make. And therefore, many of our key nodes are congested and compromised. And one last thing, and this is really a cultural issue, but I think it's critical. Americans don't get out much, right? Only 28% of us have passports, right? And we look, again, inward to our own country, or perhaps to Canada or to Mexico for our trade and exchange. This is a different world in the 21st century. We need to get beyond our continent. So, second proposition, metros, like Greater Seattle, are the centers of global trade and investment because of the engines of our economy. This is the real American economy. These are the top 100 metropolitan areas. They sit on only 1/8 of our land mass. After decades of growth, they're 2/3 of our population, they're 3/4 of our GDP, and on every single indicator that matters, they're at 75, 80, 85, 90% and above. They pack a very powerful punch. They are the majority of GDP in 47 of the 50 states. Again, we are a powerful economy because we concentrate and agglomerate our assets in our cities and metro areas. Now, Washington State, you're the quintessential metro state. Seattle, Greater Seattle, 51% of the population of the state, much higher portion of the GDP, as you see, and the whole population, the whole state, metros are 88%, your 12 metros, about 90% of the state's economy. We look more broadly around the United States, our top 100 metros dominate. They produce an estimate 65% of exports, including 75% of service exports, 63% of manufactured goods. And given their edge in advanced industry sectors like chemicals, consulting, and computers, they are on the front lines of commerce with Brazil, India, and China, and other driving nations. They drive exports for another reason. They are our logistical hubs, like SeaTac or your ports. They concentrate the movement of people and goods by air, rail, and sea. And they also concentrate employment in advanced industries and in foreign-owned firms. So we have to understand what makes metro economies in general tick, but also what makes each individual metro tick, because the bottom line is they're very distinctive. Now, this is our view pre-recession of the American economy, a consumption economy, where basically if you went to Seattle or to another portion of, or another place in the country like Syracuse, or you went to Atlanta or Austin, it all looked the same, right? Because the consumption economy is around routine, whether it's housing, building, or it's around a Walmart. You know, a Walmart is a Walmart and Walmart. It's the same prices, same goods, same footprint. That's why they're so profitable. When you get to the true economy, right, what makes you tick, it is very different compared to your competitors around the country. So we need to understand, and really what we have been trying to do at Brookings is to give everyone their dashboard, everyone their starting point on the advanced traded sectors so that you can leverage up and be the best 21st century version of yourself. So let's start with your dashboard. You know, when you look at human capital sort of in general, and you look at innovation at the broad point, you look pretty good. You know, a large portion of your jobs are in STEM occupations. You have very high education levels in this region. But here are some challenges. About 3/4 of the people with those bachelor's degrees are coming from some other state or some other portion of the world. You're not educating your own to keep pace with the fact that a lot of your STEM jobs require bachelor degrees or high skills. And so those are some of the challenges you face here. Now, you're an export powerhouse. Exports make up 1/5 of your economy. Look how much of that is around aerospace. Huge concentration in aircraft products and parts, right? Probably over-dominated by that. And then you see the service sector, which is less present because of the role of aerospace than in many other metros. On foreign direct investment, you've got a large base of employment in foreign-owned firms, but you rank just 57th on your share of employment in those companies, and you could see here where they're situating, whether it's in wireless, whether it's in aerospace, whether it's computer science design, and where those companies are coming from. You know, FDI just doesn't show up in any region for no particular reason. It tends to sort of fit within your industry ecosystem, and that's what's happening here. But you have some work to do. And finally, you're an international freight and air hub. You moved about 185 billion in goods in 2011, a large share of that coming from or to foreign countries. And your airports connect you to major global metros like Seoul, London, and Tokyo, though air connectivity still remains for you, like for many American metros, a major issue. So now we get to the final point. What do you do with all this information, right? Because at Brookings, you know, yes, we want people to understand their region, but we want to act on that. Because at a time when our national government is sort of adrift, I'm being kind here, or at times the states are not as focused as they need to be, cities and metros can't just be the engines of their economy. They can't just be the centers of trade and investment. They have to act with agency and collective purpose, political, corporate, civic, university. So we see three things happening around the country that you are either a part of or that you can basically leapfrog. The first is that cities are catalyzing trade and investment from their own. And, you know, frankly, you were doing this for a long time, right? I mean, your Trade Development Alliance, your chamber, you've focused at this level, particularly with regard to Asia and the rising nations and cities over there. And I think with the BCG report, excellent report, Seattle is a globally competitive region, you've got the database to understand your position, where you're strong, and those areas like global identity and FDI where you need to do more work. Now, you're now part of this Global Cities Exchange with Brookings and JP. And that's about 20 cities right now. It'll be upwards of about 30 cities and metros. What we're doing with all these cities is really pretty simple and straightforward. It's just the basics of business planning. We're giving every metro an assessment of their unique economic profile and potential. So, you know, what do you make? What services do you provide? What do you trade? And who do you trade with, right? Then we are working with cities and metros to sort of build objectives that grow from their distinctive position. And finally, we're working with them on what really Dow described. How do you collaborate to compete? It's not enough for the private sector to work here, or for the city government or metropolitan, county governments, suburban municipalities to work on their own, or the university to do. This is about collaboration. So this is really the mantra of the other great American urbanist, Dolly Parton, which is to figure out who you are and then do it on purpose, right? I mean, for a long time in this country, everyone just basically, we want to be Silicon Valley. Good luck, right? I mean, the Silicon Valley exists for a very particular reason going back 50 or 60 years. What you need to be is the best 21st century version of Seattle. One last piece of all this is branding. Branding matters. It's a big world, right? We got 100 metros that really pack a punch in the United States. We have 300 metros in the world. They're about 19% of the population, 50% of global GDP. How do you distinguish yourself from all these other metros that people understand when they think Seattle, they're thinking something very specific that is aligned with your unique assets. So Portland, and they're here today as part of this exchange, very clever. We build green cities. You can Google it, see the video, but that's really rooted in what Portland is, a sustainable metropolis. Or Amsterdam, which is the effort of that great trading city to bring more FDI to their place. So understand what you can do to catalyze trade and investment. Second, invest in what matters. And this just takes us back to innovation, human capital, infrastructure. What we're beginning to see in the United States, and this is really off the German model, and we've talked about this forever, but we're finally doing it, we need to really blur the lines between basic science and applied research. So there is this new initiative at the national level, but this is really not about federal policy. This is really about what places do to build a coalition of corporations and universities and philanthropy. What is going to be Seattle's Manufacturing Innovation Institute, whether or not you get federal resources, because most of the resources going into the first 4 of these innovation institutes are coming from local. Second, on human capital. We do have in advanced industry, particularly as manufacturing comes back, particularly as it comes back, we have a skills gap in many parts, in many companies, and in many super sectors. So how are we going to give students, whether in high school, whether in community colleges, whether in BA, how are we going to give them the exact skills they need to succeed? Now, in New York City, they started with P-Tech, which is like a 9 to 14 very intense focus on giving kids in high school, extended high school, the precise skills they need to succeed in New York City's specific industries. That's being taken to the state level by Governor Cuomo. Finally, in infrastructure. We have a huge infrastructure deficit in the United States. We have deferred investment in infrastructure for a very, very long time in this country. So if we look to Miami and we look to other places, they are finding very clever ways at a time when the national government, again, is scaling back its investment to look towards innovative finance techniques, public-private partnerships, interesting state and metro engagement to do what has to be done. Invest in what matters, right? Once you have your clear vision. And finally, get out, network globally. We have been working with Chicago and Mexico City, and it was great to hear Dow talk about the Montreal-Seattle relationship, because take these 2 great cities in our hemisphere, in our continent, they share an enormous amount, linked by cultural similarities, firm relationships, extensive trade. And so what we're doing with Mayor Emanuel and Mayor Mancera is helping them design, execute, and finance a city-to-city trade relationship. I mean, for the most part, people would say, when you would talk about trade, well, isn't that just something that the federal government does, right? And they do the trade agreements and they sort of set the rules. Well, the action happens at this level, right? And it happens in very particular ways across our cities and our metropolitan areas. So listen to this, because I think this is really where we're about to head this century. The foundation of cities has always been trade. 2,000 years ago, the Silk Road linked cities from China to the Roman Empire. The world is now being remade as a network of globalizing metros that trade together based on distinctive clusters of firms, specialized expertise, and cultural affinity. San Jose, Bangalore, and Seoul are technology hubs. Portland, Copenhagen, and Curitiba focus on green industry. Detroit, Stuttgart, Monterey, and Nagoya are linked by manufacturing. Metros that connect by trade grow and prosper together. So get a passport, find your trading partners, travel the new Silk Road. So as we move forward today, I would just put out this challenge to everyone in this room and to this region as a whole. This is an incredible place, and you all know it, right? For those of us who live on the East Coast, every time we come out here, why can't I live in Seattle, right? Particularly when the weather's nice, right? But, you know, like corporations or even like individuals, no city or metro can rest on their laurels. It is a fiercely competitive world out there. And you've got a great hand to play. You've got great leadership at the city and metropolitan area, but you've got some big challenges around innovation, human capital, infrastructure, around attracting more foreign direct investment, around branding yourself. So when people think about Seattle, what pops into their minds is that's a place at the cutting edge of the economy and at the cutting edge of policy. So we want to work with you because we want you to succeed like we want all American metros to succeed. So this could be, in the coming decade, as the world evolves as a network of trading cities, a Seattle moment, but it won't just happen. You're going to have to grab this, and you're going to have to make it happen with your own collective purpose and your own intentional action. Well, thank you very much.